Update 10.33 makes night fighting in Ground Branch significantly more enjoyable, but if you're a new player, you might find operating the infrared device a little confusing at first. On Twitter, the devs confirmed that at least a dayball is planned to be included later on. However, the only IR device available at the moment is the Pack 15. In this video, I'm going to go through its functionality in the game. Feel free to click on the provided timestamps in order to jump directly to the relevant sections. Before deployment, always ensure that along with attaching an IR device to your weapon, you've also equipped yourself with nods on your headgear. Otherwise, we obviously wouldn't be able to fully utilize the laser device since the IR spectrum is only perceivable through nods. This also means that if the opposing force has night vision capability, any infrared signatures we emit will be detectable, so we need to be extra careful with our laser discipline. The exception is the IR Strobe, which cannot be seen by the enemy in the game, even in PvP for gameplay purposes, so it's highly advisable to always put them on in multiplayer as it will help tremendously with IFF and prevent friendly fire. Although the aiming laser's power is limited to only a single setting in the game, we can switch between its visible and infrared modes by pressing 7. Unfortunately, we are not able to manually select the other infrared modes of the Pack 15, namely the IR Illuminator only mode and the dual mode. Sure, the IR Illuminator is usable, however, unlike its real-life counterpart, it is not yet a proper mode that we can set the device to prior to activation. Can the enemy AI see our visible laser dot? No, currently our visible laser is invisible to the enemy. But I think we can expect to see more improvements in AI behavior in update 10.34 and beyond. So how do we momentarily activate the IR Illuminator and the white light independently? Right now, I'm afraid we are unable to do that yet. By default, the hotkeys for illumination and the aiming laser are mapped to a couple of number keys on the keyboard, but unfortunately the white light and the IR Illuminator still share the same hotkey. We can use the attachments wheel menu to kind of pull it off, but it's not true momentary. It's slightly slower to actuate, kind of clunky, and because it requires the HUD, less immersive and temporarily obstructs our vision. One way the devs could rectify this issue is by allowing players to dedicate one key to activate the IR device and another separate key to activate the white light. Many players prefer to rebind the hotkeys for these to their side mouse buttons, so that configuration would help make it more analogous to their real-life tape switch or pressure pad setup.
So, white light forward, IR backwards?
Yep, unless yours is backwards.
Yeah, I think that works best because then the white light is immediately accessible from a firing grip anytime, and then you shift slightly to go. It's sort of a deliberate thing shifting over into IR. I guess the potential for white light negligent discharge is there.
It's a cool concept. I don't think it really works under duress. I haven't seen it to where I'm like, okay, this is my daytime grip, this is my nighttime grip, this is my white light grip, this is my laser grip. It just doesn't really work as well. I just try to keep everything the same. And I'm here, and then if I need to actuate this, it's very deliberate. I know that this thing is going to go off because I have to take my thumb off and move it over here to press it. So there's no white light NDs. That's a really big deal.
Because at the inopportune time, if this thing does that, it's a game changer, man, in a fucking negative way.
On the other hand, if you prefer to actuate them with your left thumb, like you probably would in real life if you're a right-hand dominant shooter, then you might want to try assigning the hotkeys to keyboard buttons that are conveniently depressible with your left thumb in order to make the controls even more intuitive and ergonomic. Personally, I found every time I wanted to operate the light or laser with the side mouse buttons, I always needed to slightly alter my mouse grip, which interfered with my aiming, so for the time being, I ended up using spacebar for IR and V for visible light. Pressing V with the left thumb makes white light activation more deliberate while still remaining reachable, plus it comes with the added benefit of eliminating the risk of negligent discharge without compromising accuracy nor freedom of movement. Now admittedly, all of this is subjective and what works for other players might not work for you, so I suggest exploring and experimenting with different keybinds to figure out a setup that is specifically tailored to best suit your own individual playstyle. How do we momentarily activate both the IR pointer and illuminator simultaneously? For active aiming or other purposes? Well, right now in Ground Branch we are still forced to activate the IR aiming laser and the illuminator separately. But if we were able to actuate the device with a single button, it will not only be more practical but also more authentic. And while dual mode proper is not in the game yet, at least not in the current build, we could kind of pull it off by binding the laser activation and the light activation to the same key, but then detach any flashlight, thus enabling us to fire the IR device in some kind of a pseudo dual mode, but obviously by doing so we forego our white light capability. This issue could be mitigated if the other modes of the IR device were also made available for us to manually select, so that instead of just the visible and infrared modes of the aiming laser, we could also cycle between the other infrared modes as well as select the visible aiming laser mode if necessary. How do we keep the device toggled on? For momentary mode, press and hold the allocated hotkey and the light will turn off when you release it. For constant on activation, simply double tap the button, then press it again to turn it off. This mimics the constant on activation of the real life Back 15, which is excellent in my opinion. However, keep in mind that the weapon lights in Ground Branch also utilize the same constant on activation system. If you're a new player, I highly advise you to familiarize yourself more with momentary activation and only use constant on sparingly, because I gotta admit, I'm very disappointed to see that the majority of players still love to simply leave their laser devices on and then refuse to hold themselves accountable for compromising the entire element's position to the enemy in PvP. This demonstrates the lack of awareness and laser discipline in the Ground Branch community in general. So I sincerely hope that moving forward, we as a gaming community will be more cognizant of the possible consequences of our actions and utilize this feature responsibly.
With a weapon mounted light, the constant on is one of those features that sounds really good, but it also is probably one that you want to use sparingly. Your go-to should always be the momentary condition for any light, whether it's a weapon mounted or a handheld. There are times for a constant to be valuable, but most of the time you're going to be better suited using momentary.
How do we adjust the beam divergence of the Illuminator? We can adjust the power and divergence of our Illuminator simultaneously using the reticle brightness up and reticle brightness down keys. By default, these are the home and end keys respectively, but to keep it simple, I rebound them to the up and down arrow keys. So literally, I just press the up arrow to increase the focus and intensity of the beam and get more throw for illumination at longer ranges, and I press the down arrow to get a lower powered flood for closer range illumination with wider coverage. If we're not aiming down sights, then the brightness adjustment keys will apply only to the IR device, but if we are aiming through our optic, then only the brightness of the optic's reticle will be adjusted. If the IR device is manually set to an infrared output, are we able to fire both the light and the visible laser simultaneously with one button press? The Pack 15 is from an older generation of technology that lacks the Vis override function. If current gen IR lasers were to make it into the game officially someday, perhaps then it would be more reasonable to expect such feature to be spotted. Having said that, if you don't mind your white light firing off whenever you actuate your IR Illuminator in momentary mode, and you don't mind leaving your IR device on visible aiming laser mode, and you bound your laser and light activation to the same key, then yeah, sure, you could get simultaneous light and visible laser activation with one button press. Last but not least is the Canted active aiming in the game. There is an unofficial way to fake this, but it's kind of funky since our character always very noticeably brings up the main sight first before rotating the gun. I don't recommend it. Anyway, if you mounted your optics so far back that it would physically collide with your NVG's intensifier tubes when you try to align the two, or if the optic you have on your weapon is not night vision compatible, then when you're aiming with nods on, you might prefer to cant your rifle to get the sight out of the way. For these reasons, I believe the devs will do their best to portray the real-life utility of this practice, maybe later on in the game's development. Alright, hope you guys found this informative. That's it from me for tonight. Have a good one.